I never expected to inherit anything from Grandpa William. Hell, I barely knew the old man. Growing up, Mom always described him as stubborn as a mule and twice as ornery, living out in the middle of nowhere like some kind of paranoid hermit. When the lawyer called me 3 weeks after his funeral, telling me I'd inherited his old farm in Nebraska, I figured it was some kind of mistake. The timing couldn't have been worse. The economic downturn had claimed my architecture firm 8 months ago, and the divorce papers had been finalized just last week. Chicago wasn't cheap on unemployment benefits, and the child support payments for my 12-year-old daughter Lily weren't getting any smaller. I'd been forced to abandon my comfortable two-bedroom apartment for a cramped one-room rental that smelled perpetually of the Indian restaurant downstairs. I was sorting through a box of keepsakes I'd managed to hold on to when I found it. Grandpa Bill's old military medal, tarnished with age but still dignified somehow. I barely remembered him giving it to me during his one and only visit when I was 9. The memory was hazy, a tall, lean man with calloused hands and eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. The only photograph I had of him sat on my makeshift desk, a faded color print from the 1970s showing him in his army uniform, standing stiffly beside my mother as a teenager. Neither of them was smiling. I was staring at this photo, absently polishing the metal with my thumb, while my laptop displayed yet another rejection email from a potential employer. When my phone rang, "Michael Anderson speaking," I answered, trying to sound professional despite the desperation clawing at my insides. "Mike, it's Rebecca." My sister's voice carried that familiar note of barely concealed judgment. She'd managed to dodge both the economic crisis and relationship troubles, her consulting firm thriving while her marriage remained picture perfect. "Mom told me about your situation. I've been thinking about it, and I'm willing to help you out with a loan." "That's generous of you, Becca." I pinched the bridge of my nose, already knowing there would be strings attached. "You need to be practical, Mike. Sell your car, liquidate your remaining assets. I can help structure a repayment plan, but you need to show some financial responsibility first." The metal in my hands suddenly felt heavier. Grandpa Bill had been many things, according to my mother, but he'd never begged. Neither would I. "I appreciate the offer, but I'll figure something out." Rebecca's exasperated sigh was so loud, I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "This is exactly the kind of stubborn pride that's keeping you down. You're just like him, you know." Before I could ask who she meant, the call waiting beeped. "I've got another call, Becca. I need to take this." "Of course you do. Just think about what I said." I switched calls without promising anything. "Michael Anderson." "Mr. Anderson, this is Peter Collins from Heartland Legal Services in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm calling regarding the estate of William Anderson." The formal tone made my stomach tighten. "Is there a problem with the inheritance?" "No, sir. I'm actually calling to arrange the transfer of property. As the sole beneficiary named in your grandfather's will, you've inherited his farm and all assets contained therein. There are some papers that need signing." I sank into my chair, the springs protesting loudly. "I don't understand. My mother always said the farm was practically worthless." There was a slight pause on the line. "The property assessment is complex. The farmhouse and surrounding structures have depreciated significantly, but the land itself maintains considerable value. However, your grandfather was quite specific about his wishes. The property is not to be sold for at least 1 year following his death." "That's—" I trailed off, not sure what to say. "I'm not in a position to maintain a farm in Nebraska." "Mr. Anderson, I strongly recommend you visit the property before making any decisions. There are aspects of your inheritance that would be better discussed in person." Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. "What do you mean?" Collins lowered his voice slightly. "I can't elaborate over the phone, but there's more to your grandfather's legacy than just the farm. He left explicit instructions that certain matters were to be explained only after you've personally visited the property." After hanging up, I called my mother. Her reaction was immediate and harsh. "That miserable old fool," she spat. "Even from the grave, he's trying to control everything. Listen to me, Michael. There's nothing left for you out there. Dad lived like a madman, convinced the world was out to get him. Sell the farm to the first buyer and be done with it." "The lawyer says I can't sell for a year. It was a condition in the will." "Of course it was," she muttered. He never could make anything simple. That night, as I tried to sleep on my lumpy futon, I kept seeing Grandpa Bill's metal gleaming in the darkness. The next morning, I made two decisions. I would drive to Nebraska to see the farm, and I would take Lily with me. Her summer break had just started, and I couldn't afford a sitter anyway. Besides, this might be my last chance to spend quality time with her before financial reality forced me to take whatever job I could find, regardless of hours or location. When I picked her up from her mother's elegant brownstone on Friday afternoon, Lily's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. "We're going on a road trip? To a real farm?" Her blue eyes, so like my own, widened with excitement. "Does it have animals? Can I ride a tractor?" "I don't know, sweetheart," I admitted, loading her purple backpack into my aging Honda Accord. "I've never been there myself. It might just be an empty old house." "But it was your grandpa's place, right? What was he like?" The innocent question caught me off guard as we merged onto the highway. "I don't really know," I said honestly. "He and my mom didn't get along. I only met him once when I was a kid." "Why didn't they get along?" I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, her face serious and thoughtful. "Mom said he changed after the war. Vietnam. Became paranoid, distrustful, moved to the middle of nowhere and cut ties with almost everyone." "That's sad," Lily said, pulling out her dog-eared copy of Nancy Drew. "Maybe he was just scared." Out of the mouths of babes. I hadn't considered that perspective before, that Grandpa Bill's isolation might have come from fear rather than misanthropy. The drive stretched on for hours, the urban landscape gradually giving way to suburbs, then small towns, and finally the seemingly endless cornfields of the Midwest. Our GPS signal faded in and out, leaving us navigating by paper map for stretches of the journey. The farther we drove from civilization, the more a strange sense of isolation crept over me. Cell service became spotty, radio stations dissolved into static, and the road narrowed to two lanes bordered by towering corn. By late afternoon, the sky had darkened with storm clouds, casting an ominous shadow over the landscape. The GPS finally gave up entirely as we turned onto a dirt road that didn't appear on any of our maps. "Are we lost, Dad?" Lily asked, peering anxiously out the window. "No, honey. The lawyer said to look for a mailbox with Anderson on it after the third crossroads." Just as the words left my mouth, we spotted it. A rusted metal mailbox leaning precariously on a weathered wooden post. Beyond it stretched a long, rutted driveway disappearing between two fields of untended wheat. The farmhouse appeared in the distance as we crested a small hill, and my heart sank to my boots. The two-story structure looked ready to collapse at the next strong wind. Paint peeled from the clapboard siding like dead skin, windows were boarded with graying plywood, and the front porch sagged dangerously in the middle. To the left stood a barn in similar condition, its red paint faded to a dull rust, half its roof missing shingles. But it was the figure standing in the wheat field that caught my attention and wouldn't let go. A scarecrow, arms outstretched on a wooden cross, seemed to stand guard over the property. Its tattered clothes flapped in the rising wind, giving it an unsettlingly lifelike appearance against the darkening sky. I parked in front of the house, the car's suspension protesting against the uneven ground. "Wait here," I told Lily, but she was already unbuckling her seatbelt, eyes wide with adventure rather than trepidation. "Look, Dad, someone's here." She pointed toward the fence line where an elderly man in well-worn overalls was hammering a loose board back into place. He turned at the sound of our car, shaded his eyes against the setting sun, and made his way toward us with the measured gait of someone who'd spent a lifetime working the land. His face was deeply tanned and wrinkled, but his eyes were sharp and alert beneath bushy white eyebrows. "You must be Bill's grandson," he called out, extending a calloused hand. "Roy Miller. I've been keeping an eye on the place since Bill passed." I shook his hand, surprised by the strength in his grip. "Mike Anderson, this is my daughter, Lily." Roy nodded at her with a gentle smile. "Pleased to meet you, young lady. Your great-grandpa mentioned you a few times." This surprised me. He knew about Lily? Bill knew more than folks gave him credit for. Roy gestured toward the house. "Let's get you settled before this storm hits. I've kept the generator fueled, so you should have some power and running water." As Roy helped us carry our bags onto the porch, he shared bits and pieces about Grandpa Bill. How he'd been a private man, but always willing to lend a hand to neighbors. How he'd never missed the veterans gathering in town each Memorial Day. How he'd spent hours in his workshop behind the barn. Your grandpa wasn't the hermit some folks made him out to be, Roy said, producing an old key ring from his pocket. He was careful about who he let into his circle, that's all. Seen too much in the war to trust easy. The front door groaned in protest as Roy unlocked it, releasing the musty scent of a house too long uninhabited. Dust motes danced in the beams of fading sunlight that penetrated the boarded windows. Sheets covered most of the furniture, ghostly shapes in the dimness. Generators out back, Roy said, flipping a switch that produced no result. I'll get it started for you. Might want to see what food's in the pantry. Canned goods should still be good. As Roy disappeared through the back door, Lily tugged at my sleeve. Dad, come look at this. She led me to the window facing the field, pointing excitedly. That scarecrow, it's so creepy. It feels like it's watching us. I had to agree. Even from this distance, there was something unnerving about the figure. It didn't hang limply like a normal scarecrow, but stood rigid and upright, as though at attention. Great-grandpa must have been really good at making scarecrows, Lily whispered, a mix of admiration and unease in her voice. The lights suddenly flickered to life as Roy got the generator running. The illumination revealed a living room frozen in time. Heavy wooden furniture from the 1970s, faded photographs on wood-paneled walls, a bookshelf filled with military history and survival manuals. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, but beneath it, I could see the evidence of a meticulously organized mind. Books arranged by subject, tools hanging on designated hooks, everything in its proper place. Your grandpa left something for you, Roy said, returning from outside. He pointed to the kitchen table where a single envelope lay, the name Michael written in a spidery hand. I picked it up, feeling the weight of the thick paper. He knew I was coming? Roy's weathered face creased in a sad smile. Bill knew his time was running short. Heart wasn't good the last few years. He believed you'd come eventually. With slightly trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. It's time, Michael. Find what's buried. The words sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the draft seeping through the old windows. Lily peered around my arm at the note. What does it mean, Dad? What's buried? Roy cleared his throat. I should be heading home before the storm hits. Got animals to tend to. I'm just down the road if you need anything. White farmhouse with green shutters. Can't miss it. He paused at the door. Bill was a good man, Mike. Complicated, but good. Whatever you find here, try to understand him. As the door closed behind Roy, thunder rumbled in the distance. Lily's hand found mine, small fingers curling around my palm. I'm a little scared, Dad, she admitted, but also excited. It's like we're in a mystery book. I squeezed her hand, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. We'll be fine, sweetheart. Let's get some dinner and make up beds for the night. Tomorrow we can explore properly. As we heated canned soup on the ancient gas stove, the wind picked up, whistling through cracks in the windows and making the old house creak and groan like a living thing. Rain began to patter against the roof, slowly at first, then with increasing intensity. I made a nest of blankets on the living room couch for Lily, not wanting to venture upstairs until I checked the structural integrity of the second floor. For myself, I settled into Grandpa Bill's recliner, the leather cracked but still comfortable. Dad? Lily's voice came through the darkness as the storm raged outside. What do you think Great-Grandpa Bill wanted you to find? I stared at the ceiling, Grandpa's cryptic note replaying in my mind. I don't know, Lilypad, but I guess we're going to find out. As if in answer, a particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the distance, I could have sworn I heard the sound of metal scraping against metal. I told myself it was just the old farm equipment in the barn, protesting against the storm. But as I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that Grandpa Bill's scarecrow was standing watch in the darkness, guarding secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. Morning arrived with startling brightness, the storm having washed the world clean. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the boarded windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. For a moment, disoriented by sleep, I didn't recognize my surroundings. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, along with a twinge in my lower back from spending the night in Grandpa Bill's ancient recliner. Lily was already awake, her blanket nest abandoned. I found her in the kitchen, standing on a chair to peer out the window toward the field. "Dad, come look! The scarecrow moved!" I joined her at the window, squinting against the morning glare. The scarecrow still stood in the field, arms outstretched, but something about its posture did seem different from yesterday. Perhaps the storm had shifted it. "The wind was pretty strong last night," I suggested, but even to my own ears, the explanation sounded hollow. The scarecrow's position appeared deliberate, not the result of random gusts. We spent the morning exploring the farmhouse, clearing dust and cobwebs from rooms that had stood empty for weeks. The second floor proved more stable than I'd feared, with 3 bedrooms and a small bathroom. Everything was meticulously organized, from the perfectly folded clothes in the dresser drawers to the chronologically arranged books on the bedside table. The more I saw of Grandpa Bill's living space, the less he resembled the paranoid recluse my mother had described. In his bedroom, I found a locked cabinet that refused to yield to gentle persuasion. I made a mental note to look for keys later. The real surprise came when we discovered a room that had clearly been prepared for visitors. 2 twin beds with fresh linen sealed in plastic, a small desk, and even a shelf with a few children's books. "Do you think he made this room for us?" Lily asked, running her fingers over a model airplane that sat on the desk. "I don't know," I admitted, unsettled by the thought that Grandpa Bill had anticipated our visit long before his death. "Maybe." By midday, we'd made the house marginally more livable, clearing enough space to move around comfortably. I decided to explore the barn while Lily organized her things in the upstairs room she'd claimed. The vast structure was in worse condition than the house, with sunlight streaming through holes in the roof and years of dust covering the equipment inside. An ancient tractor sat in one corner, its red paint faded to pink, while tools hung from pegs on the wall, many rusted beyond use. At the back of the barn, a narrow door led outside to a path I hadn't noticed before. Following it, I discovered what Roy had mentioned yesterday, Grandpa Bill's workshop. Unlike the house and barn, this smaller building showed signs of recent maintenance. The roof was intact, the windows clean, and when I pushed open the door, I found a space that looked as though its owner might return at any moment. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, each one outlined in marker so its proper place was instantly identifiable. A workbench ran along one wall, its surface clear except for a half-finished birdhouse and a scattered handful of wood shavings. The workshop smelled of sawdust and machine oil, a strangely comforting combination. My attention was drawn to a framed photograph on the wall, protected from dust by a glass cover. I lifted it carefully, and what I saw made my breath catch. A much younger Grandpa Bill stood beside a strikingly beautiful woman with dark hair and a confident smile. Between them, they held an infant. The happiness on their faces was unmistakable, genuine in a way that couldn't be faked for a camera. Below the photograph, pinned to a corkboard, was a detailed architectural drawing. I recognized the professional quality immediately. This wasn't the work of an amateur. The sketch showed what appeared to be an underground structure with multiple rooms, carefully measured and annotated in a precise hand. Notes in the margins referred to entrance concealment and secure ventilation, while dotted lines indicated something beneath the farmhouse and extending out toward the field where the scarecrow stood. I was studying the drawing when a voice behind me made me jump. "Your grandpa could have been an engineer in another life." Roy stood in the doorway, a paper bag in his hands. "Brought you folks some fresh eggs and bread. Figured your breakfast options might be limited." "Thank you," I said, still holding the photograph. "Roy, who is this woman? With my grandfather?" The old man stepped closer, his expression softening. "That's Ellanor Reynolds, Ellie, everyone called her, the love of Bill's life. But my grandmother's name was Margaret. She died before I was born." Roy's eyebrows rose slightly. "Is that what your mother told you?" He sighed, setting the bag on the workbench. "It's not my place to tell Bill's story, but I will say this. Sometimes the truth is complicated, and sometimes people keep secrets to protect the ones they love." I gestured to the architectural drawing. "And this? What was he planning to build?" A guarded look crossed Roy's face. "Your grandpa had his reasons for everything he did. That's all I'll say on the matter." He nodded toward the farmhouse. "You should get those eggs in the refrigerator before they spoil. And Mike, Be careful what you go digging for around here. Some things are buried for a reason. As Roy walked away, I carefully returned the photograph to the wall, my mind racing with questions. Who was Ellanor Reynolds, and why had my mother never mentioned her? What was the underground structure in the drawing, and had Grandpa Bill actually built it? Most importantly, what did his cryptic note mean? Back at the house, I found Lily sitting at the kitchen table with a man in a crisp suit who seemed entirely out of place in the dusty farmhouse. "Dad, this is Mr. Collins," she announced. "He brought papers for you to sign." Peter Collins rose to shake my hand. "Mr. Anderson, I see you've decided to visit the property after all." "Seemed like the responsible thing to do before making any decisions," I replied, setting Roy's bag on the counter. "You mentioned there were aspects of the inheritance that couldn't be discussed over the phone?" Collins nodded, his expression serious. "Perhaps we could speak privately?" I glanced at Lily, who was already pulling out her book. "Why don't you read on the porch, sweetheart? The fresh air will be good." Once she was out of earshot, Collins opened his briefcase and removed several folders. "Your grandfather was a very methodical man, Mr. Anderson. He anticipated every contingency." He handed me the first folder. "These are the standard inheritance documents: property deed, vehicle titles, banking information. The farm has been paid off for decades, and the property taxes are covered through the end of the year." The second folder was thicker. "This contains your grandfather's personal journal and certain legal documents he wanted you to have. I've only been privy to what was necessary for executing the will." I opened the journal to a random page, recognizing the same spidery handwriting from the note. The entry described modifications to the workshop's heating system. Mundane details that revealed nothing about the mysteries I'd encountered. "There's one more item," Collins said, his voice lowering slightly. "Your grandfather was explicit that this should only be given to you if you came to the farm voluntarily and stayed at least 3 days." He removed a small USB drive from an inner pocket. He called it his life insurance. His exact words were, "This is Michael's life insurance too, if things go sideways." A chill ran down my spine. "What's on it?" "I don't know," Collins admitted, "and frankly, I don't want to know. William was concerned about certain parties taking an interest in his affairs toward the end of his life." "What parties?" Collins straightened his tie, clearly uncomfortable. "Men in expensive suits asking questions in town. Nothing overt, just unusual interest in a reclusive old farmer. William mentioned being followed once or twice when he drove into Lincoln." "Are you saying my grandfather was being threatened?" "I'm not saying anything of the sort," Collins replied carefully, "simply relaying observations. But I will add this. 3 different real estate developers have contacted my office since your grandfather's death, all expressing interest in purchasing this property immediately, all offering well above market value." He glanced toward the window, then lowered his voice further. "Be careful, Mr. Anderson. William was concerned about your safety if you chose to claim your inheritance. That's all I can say." He closed his briefcase with a snap. "I'll be in touch. The executor's office can provide any financial assistance you needed for maintaining the property during the 1-year holding period." After Collins left, I sat at the kitchen table, turning the USB drive over in my hands. What could possibly be on it that would constitute life insurance? And why would anyone threaten an elderly farmer living in the middle of nowhere? I was still pondering these questions when Lily came racing in from the porch, her eyes wide with excitement. "Dad! Dad!" "I think I heard something under the house." "Probably just the pipes, honey," I said, quickly pocketing the USB drive. "No, it wasn't pipes. It was like a humming sound, and then metal clanking, like someone's down there." I forced a reassuring smile. "Old houses make all kinds of noises. Tell you what, why don't we explore outside a bit? I need to check out that scarecrow up close." The walk to the field took longer than expected. What had appeared to be a short distance from the house stretched into a good quarter-mile trek through knee-high wheat that had gone wild without tending. Lily charged ahead, her initial fear of the scarecrow replaced by curiosity. Up close, the figure was even more unsettling. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, the scarecrow was constructed with unusual precision. Its wooden frame was solid oak, the crossbeam firmly anchored in what appeared to be a concrete base partially hidden by soil and wheat. The tattered clothes weren't the random rags of a typical scarecrow, but a complete set of what looked like military fatigues, weathered by years of exposure. The head was a burlap sack stuffed with straw, with buttons sewn on for eyes and a stitched line for a mouth. But something about its positioning, the angle of the head tilted slightly, as if observing us, sent a shiver down my spine. "Dad, look at this," Lily called, kneeling at the base of the structure. She pointed to what appeared to be a small metal plate embedded in the concrete. Years of weathering had obscured whatever might have been engraved there. "Can I clean it off?" she asked, already digging in her pocket for a tissue. "Go ahead," I replied, circling the scarecrow. From this angle, I could see that the back of the wooden post had a series of notches cut into it, almost like a ladder missing its rungs. Lily rubbed at the metal plate, gradually revealing a short inscription: Sentinel, Stand Guard. Bingo. Below these words was a series of numbers that might have been coordinates or a date. The final line simply read, WA to MA, William Anderson to Michael Anderson. "It's for you, Dad," Lily said, her voice hushed with awe. "Great-grandpa made this for you." I stared at the scarecrow, suddenly understanding that this was no ordinary farm decoration. It was marking something. Perhaps the entrance to whatever underground structure had been detailed in those architectural drawings. As we made our way back to the house, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the overgrown fields. Lily chattered excitedly about our discovery, her imagination spinning tales of secret treasure and hidden rooms. I listened with half an ear, my mind occupied with darker possibilities. Why would Grandpa Bill need an underground shelter? What was he hiding from? Or hiding? That night, after Lily had gone to bed in her newly claimed room, I sat at the kitchen table with Grandpa Bill's journal, a glass of whiskey I'd found in a cabinet, and the USB drive. The journal's earliest entries dated back to the 1970s, describing his return from Vietnam and adjustment to civilian life. The writing was terse, factual, with little emotion evident in the descriptions of nightmares and struggles with what would now be recognized as PTSD. And then, a name began to appear with increasing frequency: Ellanor Reynolds. The tone of the entries shifted, warming as Bill described meeting the daughter of wealthy businessman Marcus Reynolds at a veterans support event she'd organized. Their courtship was documented in brief but telling entries. "Took Ellie to dinner. She doesn't care that I'm just a mechanic. Says her father's money never brought him happiness. Picnic by the lake. Ellie said she loves me. God help me, I said it back. Met with Marcus Reynolds today. He made it clear I'm not good enough for his daughter. Ellie says she doesn't care what he thinks." Then came an entry that made me sit up straight. Elizabeth born today. 7 6 OZ. Perfect in every way. Ellie exhausted but radiant. I never knew I could love someone so instantly, so completely. Everything changes now. I'll be worthy of them both. Elizabeth, my mother's name. But my grandmother's name was Margaret, wasn't it? The entries that followed documented domestic happiness, interspersed with growing concerns about Marcus Reynolds and his business associates. Reynolds' import/export is a front. Ellie found documents. Money laundering through agricultural properties. She wants to go to the authorities. Ellie received threats today. Anonymous call. They know about Elizabeth. I'm moving them to the farm while we figure out next steps. And then a devastating entry dated May 1974. Ellie gone. Witness protection. Her testimony will put Reynolds away for decades. But she had to disappear. They won't let her take Elizabeth. Too dangerous. Too visible. She kissed our daughter goodbye while she slept. I promised to raise her right, to tell her about her mother when it's safe. Ellie promised to find a way to contact us when she can. I don't know if that day will ever come. The next several pages had been torn out, as if Bill couldn't bear to reread whatever he'd written in the immediate aftermath. When the journal resumed, the entries were sparse, practical, focused on raising a young daughter alone and building a life on the farm. My mother had grown up believing her mother was dead. That much was clear from subsequent entries describing her questions and Bill's carefully constructed half-truths. By her teenage years, Elizabeth had grown increasingly rebellious, resentful of the isolated farm life and her father's strict security measures. She left for college and rarely returned, eventually cutting off contact almost entirely. The final sections of the journal documented Bill's decades-long investigation into Marcus Reynolds' criminal network. What had begun as a personal quest to understand the forces that had torn his family apart had evolved into something far more comprehensive. Bill had tracked shell companies, property acquisitions, political connections, and a pattern of suspicious deaths among people who threatened the organization. Most disturbing were the entries from the past few years, detailing Bill's growing conviction that the network, now led by a man named Richard Thornton, was planning something bigger than mere money laundering. Properties were being acquired in strategic locations around major agricultural centers, specialized equipment purchased, people with specific expertise recruited. The final entry, dated just 2 weeks before his death, sent a chill through me. Surveillance increased. Black SUV parked at the crossroads yesterday. Same vehicle followed me to Lincoln last week. They know I'm on to them, but they don't know what I've built, what I've hidden. The bunker is ready, all evidence secured. If anything happens to me, Michael will come. Elizabeth won't, but her son might. He has the same curiosity I had at his age, the same need to know the truth. And when he finds it, God help Richard Thornton. I closed the journal, my hands trembling slightly. My grandfather hadn't been a paranoid recluse. He'd been investigating a criminal conspiracy that had ultimately separated him from the love of his life and alienated his daughter. And now, somehow, I was caught in the same web. I picked up the USB drive, turning it over in my fingers. Whatever evidence Grandpa Bill had collected over the decades was likely stored here. The question was, did I want to see it? Did I want to know the truth that had destroyed my family across 2 generations? Before I could decide, a sound from outside made me freeze. Metal scraping against metal. The same sound Lily had mentioned hearing earlier. The same sound I thought I'd heard during the storm. It was coming from the direction of the field, from the scarecrow. I moved to the kitchen window, peering out into the darkness. The moon provided just enough light to make out the scarecrow's silhouette in the distance. And next to it, moving with deliberate purpose, was a human figure. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the unknown visitor examine the base of the scarecrow. Was this one of Thornton's men? Had they been watching the farm, waiting for someone to claim Bill's inheritance? I needed to protect Lily. I needed to understand what we'd stumbled into. Most of all, I needed to find what Grandpa Bill had buried, before someone else did. As if reading my thoughts, thunder rumbled in the distance. Another storm was coming, and with it, I suspected, revelations that would change everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. The first light of dawn cast long shadows across the weathered floorboards as I forced my tired body out of Grandpa Bill's old recliner. My back protested the movement, a sharp reminder of a night spent watching the darkness for intruders. Lily was still asleep upstairs, her childhood ability to find rest even in uncertain circumstances a small blessing. I stood at the kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, watching the scarecrow in the distance. In the harsh morning light, it seemed to stand at a slightly different angle than before, its burlap head tilted as if in silent contemplation of the farmhouse. The mysterious figure I'd spotted last night was gone, leaving behind only footprints in the mud that the overnight rain had already begun to wash away. "Dad, are we going to explore more today?" Lily appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, but eyes bright with excitement. "That's the plan," I replied, trying to match her enthusiasm while hiding my growing unease. "Let's get some breakfast first." We spent the morning methodically cleaning the farmhouse, uncovering layers of Grandpa Bill's life in the process. His possessions told the story of a meticulous, orderly mind. Books were arranged by subject and then alphabetically. Tools hung on labeled hooks. Even his clothing in the upstairs dresser was folded with military precision. "Great-grandpa was super organized," Lily observed as she helped dust the living room shelves. "Mom says I get my neatness from your side of the family. Maybe it was from him." The thought created an unexpected connection across generations, a trait passed down that I'd never recognized. What else had I inherited from this man I barely knew? In the back of Grandpa Bill's closet, we discovered a heavy metal cabinet secured with a padlock. The key wasn't on the ring Collins had given me, and the lock resisted my amateur attempts at picking it. "We could try to find bolt cutters in the barn," Lily suggested, her Nancy Drew instincts kicking in. Let's hold off on breaking into things for now, I said, making a mental note to return to the cabinet later. There's still plenty to explore. Around midday, the crunch of tires on gravel announced Roy's return. He arrived carrying a cardboard box filled with homemade bread, preserves, and a container of beef stew. Thought you two might appreciate a home-cooked meal, he said, setting the box on the kitchen counter. How's the exploration going? We're making progress, I replied, watching him carefully, finding some interesting things about my grandfather. Roy nodded, his weathered face revealing nothing. Bill was an interesting man. The journal mentioned he served in Vietnam, I ventured, testing the waters. 2 tours, Roy confirmed. That's where we met. Same unit, different specialties. I was a radio operator. Bill worked in intelligence. Intelligence? The word caught my attention. Military intelligence? Roy seemed to consider his words carefully. Bill had a talent for patterns, seeing connections others missed. After the war, certain agencies found that skill valuable. Are you saying my grandfather was a spy? Roy chuckled, but there was little humor in it. Nothing so dramatic. Consultant, maybe, analyst. He never discussed specifics, and I never asked. In our line of work, questions could get people killed. Lily, who had been quietly absorbing this conversation, perked up. Was great-grandpa like a secret agent? Your great-grandpa was a patriot, Roy answered, ruffling her hair. He served his country in ways most people never knew about. That's all I can say. After Roy left, promising to return the next day with more supplies, Lily could barely contain her excitement. Dad, this is better than Nancy Drew. Great-grandpa was a secret agent with a mysterious past. And now we're solving his last case. I didn't have the heart to temper her enthusiasm with my growing concerns. If Grandpa Bill had indeed worked for intelligence agencies, the architectural drawings of an underground bunker took on a more ominous significance. This wasn't a paranoid old man's project. It was the work of a professional who believed he needed a secure facility. We spent the afternoon exploring the barn more thoroughly, cataloging the abandoned farm equipment, and searching for any clues. In a dusty corner, behind stacks of moldering hay bales, I discovered a metal door built into the barn's foundation. It was secured with a padlock identical to the one on the cabinet upstairs. Another mystery door, Lily whispered, her eyes wide. Do you think it leads to a secret passage? I think it's probably just a root cellar, I replied, trying the handle anyway. The door was solid, the lock unyielding. As evening approached, we returned to the workshop behind the barn. In daylight, I could appreciate the craftsmanship that had gone into the small building. Unlike the other structures on the farm, the workshop had been maintained meticulously, its windows clean, its roof intact. Inside, the organization was even more impressive. Each tool hanging in its designated spot, supplies arranged by type and frequency of use, a workbench swept clean except for that half-finished birdhouse. I studied the architectural drawings more carefully now, recognizing elements that matched the farmhouse's foundation. The underground structure appeared to extend from beneath the house toward the field where the scarecrow stood. According to the dimensions, it was substantial. Multiple rooms, reinforced walls, independent ventilation, and power systems. This wasn't a simple bomb shelter. It was a fully functional living space designed to withstand prolonged isolation. Dad, look at this, Lily called from the other side of the workshop. She had opened a small drawer in a filing cabinet, revealing dozens of carefully labeled USB drives. There's so many of them. Each drive bore a date and cryptic abbreviations. MR Props 97, Thornton 05, Age Disc 22. The most recent was dated just a month before Grandpa Bill's death. Can we look at them? Lily asked, already reaching for one. Not here, I said, gathering the drives into a small toolbox I found on a shelf. Let's take them back to the house. As we walked back, the setting sun cast our shadows long across the overgrown field. The scarecrow watched our progress, its button eyes reflecting the dying light. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being observed, not just by the eerie sentinel, but by someone else, someone who knew what we were discovering. After dinner, with Lily safely tucked into her bedroom with a book, I connected one of the USB drives to my laptop. It contained hundreds of PDF files, property records, corporate filings, tax documents, all relating to various agricultural businesses across the Midwest. Grandpa Bill had annotated each document meticulously, highlighting connections between seemingly unrelated companies, tracking ownership changes through shell corporations, mapping a complex web of financial transactions. I tried another drive, then another. Each contained similar documentation, building a comprehensive picture of what appeared to be a massive money laundering operation disguised as legitimate agricultural businesses. At the center of it all was Reynolds Agricultural Holdings, founded by Marcus Reynolds in the 1960s and now controlled by his protege, Richard Thornton. The scope of Grandpa Bill's investigation was staggering. For decades, he had methodically tracked the network's expansion, documenting suspicious land acquisitions, political connections, and a disturbing pattern of convenient accidents befalling those who asked too many questions. I was so engrossed in the files that the knock at the front door nearly caused me to drop my laptop. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was past 11 p.m., far too late for casual visitors. I moved silently to the window, peering through the bump in the boards. Peter Collins stood on the porch, his suit rumpled, his expression tense. I opened the door cautiously. "Mr. Anderson," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I apologize for the late hour, but I needed to speak with you immediately." I ushered him inside, checking the darkness behind him before securing the door. "What's happened?" Collins ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Two men came to my office this afternoon, asking about William's estate. They claimed to be from the county assessor's office, but their identification didn't look right. When I refused to discuss the matter, they became insistent." "Did they threaten you?" "Not explicitly, but they made it clear they knew where I lived, mentioned my wife by name." Collins removed his glasses, cleaning them nervously. "After they left, I contacted a colleague at the county office. No one matching their description works there." "Did you call the police?" "And tell them what? That two men asked questions that made me uncomfortable?" He shook his head. "I came here instead to warn you and to give you these." From his briefcase, Collins produced a thick manila envelope and Grandpa Bill's personal journal. "William left instructions that these should be given to you on the third day of your stay, but under the circumstances, I thought it best not to wait." I accepted the items, feeling their weight both physically and metaphorically. "What else do you know about my grandfather's situation?" Collins hesitated. "Only what he chose to tell me, which wasn't much. I know he was concerned about certain business interests taking over agricultural land throughout the region. He mentioned Richard Thornton several times, never favorably." "Thornton," I repeated, the name already familiar from the USB drives. "The CEO of Reynolds Agricultural Holdings." Collins nodded. William believed Thornton was continuing Marcus Reynolds' work. Whatever that entailed, he was gathering evidence, building a case. He glanced toward the stairs. "Is your daughter here?" "Asleep upstairs." "Good." Collins lowered his voice further. "William was worried about your safety if you came to claim the farm. He said, and I quote, 'They'll come for Mike just like they came for me, but he'll have what I never did. Preparation.'" A chill ran down my spine. "Are you saying my grandfather's death wasn't from natural causes?" "His heart gave out," Collins said carefully. "That's what the medical examiner determined. But William had told me repeatedly that if anything happened to him suddenly, I should consider it suspicious. He'd been receiving threats." Collins stood, retrieving his briefcase. "I should go. Being seen here could complicate things for both of us." At the door, he paused. "William believed in you, Mr. Anderson. He said you had the skills to finish what he started." "I don't know what that means, but I thought you should know." After Collins left, I returned to the kitchen table, opening the manila envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were legal documents, property deeds for the farm, bank account information, insurance policies, but also a hand-drawn map of the property with a specific location marked in red: the Scarecrow. Beneath the map was a single sheet of paper with a series of numbers that looked like GPS coordinates, followed by instructions. Access code, Elizabeth's birthday, reverse order. Internal power must be activated within 30 minutes of entry to prevent lockdown. Trust Roy. Trust no one else until you've seen everything. I unfolded the map, studying the marked location. According to this, there was indeed an entrance to an underground structure directly beneath the Scarecrow. But how to access it? The concrete base I'd observed wouldn't simply lift away. Sleep eluded me that night. I sat in the living room, Grandpa Bill's journal open in my lap, a flashlight angled to illuminate the pages without broadcasting light through the windows. The entries from the past few years documented his growing concern about Thornton's activities, the systematic acquisition of farms in a ring surrounding major Midwestern cities, the installation of specialized equipment at key properties, the recruitment of former military personnel with specific skills. Thornton isn't just continuing the money laundering, one entry read. He's preparing for something bigger. The equipment they're installing at the Northridge farm isn't agricultural. It's designed to monitor and potentially control water flow to the city reservoir. Similar setups at 7 other properties surrounding major population centers. This isn't crime, it's infrastructure for hostile action. The final entries were increasingly urgent, describing surveillance of the farm, suspicious vehicles parked at the crossroads, unknown figures observed in the fields at night. And then, the last entry, dated just 3 days before his death, confronted Thornton today. Told him I know what they're planning. He didn't deny it, just smiled and said, "Bill, you're a relic fighting yesterday's war. The future belongs to those who control resources, not territory." Made it clear that if anything happens to me, evidence goes public. Don't think he believed me. Must accelerate preparations. Michael is the key now. I closed the journal, my mind racing. Whatever conspiracy Grandpa Bill had uncovered, it had likely cost him his life. And now, unknowingly, I had stepped into his shoes, bringing my daughter into danger in the process. A metallic scraping sound from outside froze me in place. There it was again, the same noise I'd heard the previous night, coming from the direction of the scarecrow. Moving silently to the window, I peered through the gap in the boards. In the pale moonlight, I could make out a figure kneeling at the base of the scarecrow, working methodically at something I couldn't see. This was no curious trespasser. Their movements were too purposeful, too familiar with the property. I needed to know what they were doing. Grabbing a heavy flashlight that could double as a weapon if necessary, I slipped out the back door and circled around the barn, approaching the field from behind the workshop where shadows would conceal my movement. The night air was heavy with moisture, promising another storm. In the distance, heat lightning flashed silently, briefly illuminating the landscape in stark relief. During one such flash, I caught a clearer glimpse of the figure. Roy Miller, his weathered hands working a hidden mechanism at the scarecrow's base. I stepped forward, no longer concerned with concealment. "Roy?" He whirled around, hand moving instinctively to his waistband before recognition dawned. "Jesus, Mike, don't sneak up on an old soldier like that. What are you doing out here in the middle of the night?" Roy's expression was unreadable in the darkness. "Same as you, I expect. Looking for answers." He gestured to the scarecrow. "Bill and I built this together back when your mother was still a little girl. It's not just a scarecrow. It's an entrance," I said, the pieces falling into place, "to the bunker." Roy nodded slowly. "Bill told me you'd figure it out. Said you had his knack for seeing patterns." He turned back to the base, his fingers finding a nearly invisible seam in the concrete. "There's a sequence. Bill changed it regularly, but he always left clues in the workshop. Elizabeth's birthday, reverse order," I said, remembering the note. Roy's hands paused. "You found his instructions." It wasn't a question. "Good. That makes this easier." With practiced movements, Roy manipulated something within the concrete base. A soft click was followed by a low humming sound. The ground around the scarecrow began to shift. Soil and wheat parting as a section of earth approximately 6 feet in diameter slowly descended, revealing a circular opening with a metal ladder leading down into darkness. "Hydraulic lift," Roy explained, pride evident in his voice. "Bill designed it, I helped build it, powered by a generator deep underground, completely independent from the farm's electricity." I stared at the engineering marvel hidden beneath an ordinary scarecrow. All this time, my mother grew up here, never knowing this existed beneath her feet. Elizabeth knew there was a fallout shelter. Most farms had them back then. She didn't know Bill had expanded it into something more. Roy gestured to the opening. "We should hurry. The entrance automatically reseals after 5 minutes." The descent into darkness was disorienting, the beam of my flashlight barely penetrating the gloom. The metal ladder was cool and solid beneath my hands, professionally installed and well-maintained despite its age. At the bottom, perhaps 15 feet down, we reached a small landing facing a heavy steel door with a wheel lock like those on naval vessels. Roy turned the wheel with practiced ease, the mechanism surprisingly silent. Bill kept everything in perfect working order, came down here at least once a week to run maintenance. The door swung open, revealing a narrow corridor lit by emergency LEDs that activated at our movement. The walls were poured concrete, the floor smooth epoxy. At the end of the corridor stood another door, this one with a digital keypad. "This is where I leave you," Roy said, stepping back. "The code is Elizabeth's birthday, like the note said. Reverse order, month, day, year." I hesitated, my hand on the keypad. "You're not coming in?" Roy shook his head. Bill's instructions were clear. "You need to see it alone first. I'll keep watch topside, make sure we don't get any unwelcome visitors." He glanced at his watch. "Remember, you need to activate the main power within 30 minutes, or the security system will lock everything down. The switch is on the right wall of the main room, looks like a circuit breaker panel." With that, he climbed back up the ladder, leaving me alone in the eerie glow of the emergency lights. I turned to the keypad, thinking of my mother's birth date, September 15th, 1974. Reverse order would be 741509. I entered the numbers, holding my breath. The keypad flashed green, and the door unlocked with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. I pushed it open, stepping into what appeared to be a professional-grade command center. Emergency lighting revealed a large room approximately 30 feet square. One wall was lined with computer monitors and communications equipment. Another held maps of the Midwest with dozens of locations marked in different colors. A third wall contained filing cabinets, bookshelves, and storage containers, all meticulously labeled. The center of the room held a conference table surrounded by chairs, its surface covered with documents protected by a layer of clear plastic. Following Roy's instructions, I located the power panel on the right wall and flipped the main switch. The room hummed to life, lights brightening, ventilation systems activating, computers booting up with soft electronic chimes. What had appeared impressive in the emergency lighting was truly remarkable at full illumination. This was no amateur bunker built by a paranoid survivalist. This was a professional operations center that would have been at home in any government facility. The technology spanned decades. Older radio equipment sharing space with modern computers, analog systems backing up digital ones. Everything was redundant, designed to function regardless of external conditions. A door on the far side of the room led to living quarters, a small but efficient apartment with a kitchenette, bathroom, sleeping area, and storage room stocked with enough supplies to last months. Another door opened to a workshop similar to the one behind the barn, but with more specialized equipment and materials. Back in the main room, I approached the conference table, examining the documents preserved beneath the plastic. They detailed what appeared to be a comprehensive plan for controlling water and food distribution across the Midwest. Maps showed strategic properties surrounding major cities, each one part of Reynolds Agricultural Holdings or its subsidiaries. Technical specifications outlined modifications to irrigation systems, water treatment facilities, and distribution networks. Handwritten notes in Grandpa Bill's spidery script filled the margins. Not just money laundering anymore. Infrastructure takeover disguised as agricultural investment. Control water, control food, control people. Thornton's network has infiltrated local governments, water boards, agricultural co-ops. When crisis hits, natural or manufactured, they'll control who gets resources. My attention was drawn to a framed photograph on the wall, larger and clearer than the one in the workshop. It showed Grandpa Bill and Ellanor Reynolds on what appeared to be their wedding day, both radiantly happy. Beside it hung a family portrait, Bill, Ellanor, and infant Elizabeth, preserved behind glass like precious artifacts from a lost world. Beneath these photos was a collection of letters in protective sleeves, each bearing the same handwriting, elegant and flowing, distinctly feminine. I removed one carefully, reading words written decades ago. "My dearest Bill, the program people say this will be my last letter for some time. It's too dangerous to maintain contact even through the channels we've established. I dream of the day we can be together again, when Elizabeth can know her mother beyond the stories you tell her. Until then, know that I love you both more than life itself. What I've done, testifying against my father, was the hardest and yet easiest decision I've ever made. Hard because it has separated us. Easy because right and wrong were so clear. Keep our daughter safe. Tell her I didn't abandon her by choice. All my love, now and forever, Ellie. The letter was dated October 1974, nearly 50 years ago. Had they ever reunited? Had my grandmother lived all these decades in witness protection, separated from the man she loved and the daughter she'd been forced to leave behind? A soft ping from one of the computers drew my attention. The screen displayed a message. Secure system activated. Sentinel protocol online. Below this appeared a directory of files, thousands of them, organized chronologically and by subject. The most recent folder was labeled simply Thornton Endgame. I clicked it open, revealing documents dated just weeks before Grandpa Bill's death. Satellite images of agricultural properties, intercepted communications, financial transactions, personnel movements. The scope of what my grandfather had been tracking was staggering. This wasn't just a criminal enterprise. It was preparation for something that looked disturbingly like a hostile takeover of critical infrastructure. According to Grandpa Bill's analysis, Thornton's organization had positioned itself to control water and food distribution to major population centers throughout the Midwest. In the event of a crisis, drought, pandemic, civil unrest, they would have leverage over millions of people. A final document caught my eye. A letter addressed to me, created the day before Grandpa Bill died. Michael, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you found what I built to protect our family and ultimately our country. I'm sorry for the burden I'm placing on your shoulders, but you're the only one I can trust with this. Your mother chose to believe I was paranoid, delusional. Perhaps that was easier than accepting the truth about her mother and what happened to our family. Ellanor is alive. She's been in witness protection since 1974. Her identity erased and rebuilt multiple times as my former father-in-law's associates came close to finding her. I maintained contact through secure channels, helped her move when necessary, kept her updated on Elizabeth, and later on you. She knows about Lily. The thumb drive contains everything you need, evidence I've collected over decades, contact protocols, safe locations. Richard Thornton has continued and expanded Marcus Reynolds' criminal enterprise beyond anything Reynolds imagined. They're not just laundering money anymore. They're positioning for control of critical resources. Trust Roy Miller. He's been my right hand since Vietnam. Trust Agent Diana Harper at the FBI's Lincoln Field office. Contact protocol on the drive. Trust no one else until they've been verified through Harper. I'm sorry for what this will do to your life, but I believe in you, Michael. You have the skills and the integrity to finish what I started. Your grandfather, William Anderson. I sat heavily in the nearest chair, the weight of Grandpa Bill's legacy pressing down on me. He hadn't been a paranoid recluse. He'd been a man fighting a decades-long battle against a powerful criminal organization. A battle that had cost him his wife and eventually his relationship with his daughter. And now that battle was mine. A sudden crash from above startled me out of my thoughts. It sounded like the farmhouse door being forced open. Through the bunker's sophisticated audio monitoring system, I could hear multiple sets of footsteps and voices giving clipped, professional-sounding commands. Clear the ground floor. Check upstairs. Find Anderson and the girl. My blood ran cold. Lily was still asleep in the farmhouse, unaware of the danger. I had to get to her. I rushed to the communications panel, searching for a way to contact Roy. A red button labeled Emergency Alert seemed the most promising option. I pressed it, hoping it would signal him without alerting the intruders. The computer screen suddenly shifted, displaying multiple camera feeds from around the property. The technology was far more sophisticated than I had expected. High-definition night vision cameras concealed in trees, fence posts, and outbuildings provided complete coverage of the farm. I could see black SUVs parked in the driveway, men in tactical gear moving through the house, Roy nowhere in sight. And on one screen I saw Lily, awake and terrified, hiding under her bed as booted feet moved around her room. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but years of crisis management in my architecture firm kicked in. I needed a plan, needed to use the resources available to me. The bunker clearly had security measures. The question was how to activate them without putting Lily in danger. A file cabinet labeled Security Protocols caught my eye. I yanked it open, finding a detailed manual for the bunker's defense systems. Flipping through pages frantically, I found what I needed, a section titled Non-Lethal Countermeasures. According to the manual, the farm had been equipped with a sophisticated system of smoke generators, sound deterrents, and emergency lighting that could be activated independently or all at once. The effect would be disorienting but not dangerous, enough to create confusion and provide an opportunity for escape. I returned to the control panel, following the instructions to activate the diversion protocol. On the monitors, I watched as smoke began billowing from vents concealed around the farmhouse, while powerful lights suddenly illuminated the yard with blinding intensity. Through the audio system, I could hear the startled shouts of the intruders as they were caught off guard. But where was Roy? Had they captured him? Eliminated him? I had no time to wonder. The diversion would only last minutes, and I needed to reach Lily. According to the property map on the wall, the bunker had a secondary exit that led to the barn. That would put me closer to the house than returning via the scarecrow entrance. Grabbing a flashlight from a shelf and the USB drive from the computer, I headed for the secondary exit. The tunnel was narrower than the main entrance, forcing me to crouch as I moved. It ended at a ladder leading up to what appeared to be a trapdoor. I climbed quickly, pushing against the door with my shoulder. It opened into a storage room in the back of the barn, concealed behind stacks of ancient hay bales. I emerged into chaos. The farm's defense systems had created a surreal landscape of swirling smoke illuminated by strobing lights, punctuated by periodic blasts of sound that made it difficult to think, let alone coordinate an assault. Using the confusion as cover, I made my way toward the house, staying low and moving from shadow to shadow. Through gaps in the smoke, I could see figures stumbling about, shouting to each other over the noise. I reached the back porch and slipped inside through the kitchen door. The interior was hazy with smoke, the strobing lights from outside creating a disorienting effect through the windows. Moving silently up the stairs, I approached Lily's room, hearing confused voices from inside. "She's not here. Check under the bed." "Nothing. The closet's empty too." Regroup downstairs. "The smoke system activated. They must have a security setup we didn't know about." I waited until the footsteps retreated, then slipped into Lily's room, heart pounding. "Lily," I whispered urgently. "Lily, it's Dad." A soft whimper came from the closet, not from under the bed where I'd seen her on the camera. She must have moved. I pulled open the door to find her curled in the corner, eyes wide with fear. "Dad, there are men with guns," she gasped, throwing herself into my arms. "I know, sweetheart. We need to go right now. Stay quiet and do exactly as I say." I held her close, feeling her trembling against me. "We're going to be okay, but we have to move fast." A voice called up from below, authoritative and cold. "Mr. Anderson, we know you're in the house. Come down and bring your daughter. We just want to talk." "Who are they?" Lily whispered. "Bad people," I replied simply. "They want something Grandpa Bill left behind." Through the window, I could see the smoke beginning to dissipate, the emergency lights cycling down. Our diversion was ending. Soon they would begin a systematic search of the house again. "We need to get to the barn," I whispered. "There's another way out through there." Holding Lily's hand tightly, I led her into the hallway. The stairs would be watched, but I remembered seeing a large oak tree outside the window at the end of the hall, one whose branches extended close to the house. It was a risky escape route, but better than facing armed men. We were halfway down the hall when a floorboard creaked beneath my foot. A voice called up immediately. "Second floor, movement in the hallway." Abandoning stealth, I scooped Lily into my arms and ran for the window, yanking it open as booted feet pounded up the stairs. With no time to think about the danger, I helped Lily onto the nearest branch. "Climb down, honey. I'm right behind you." With the agility of youth, she scrambled down the tree as I followed, less gracefully but driven by desperate necessity. We had just reached the ground when a flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating us from the window above. "There, by the tree." I grabbed Lily's hand and ran toward the barn, zigzagging to make us harder targets. The sound of pursuit grew behind us, multiple sets of footsteps crashing through the overgrown yard. We burst into the barn, racing toward the back, where I knew the hidden entrance to the tunnel waited. We had nearly reached it when the barn door crashed open behind us, silhouetting a tall figure against the night sky. "Stop right there, Anderson!" The voice was coldly professional, devoid of anger or excitement. I pushed Lily behind a stack of hay bales, positioning myself between her and the newcomer. "Who are you? What do you want?" I demanded, trying to buy time as I edged toward the hidden trapdoor. The figure stepped forward, revealing a lean man in an expensive suit, incongruous among the dust and decay of the old barn. His silver hair was immaculately styled, his posture military straight despite his age, which I guessed to be around 60. "My name is Richard Thornton," he said, as casual as if we were meeting at a business lunch. "And I want what Bill Anderson spent decades stealing from me. Information that doesn't belong to him or to you." Behind Thornton, two men in tactical gear entered the barn, weapons held at the ready. There was no sign of Roy, and I feared the worst. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, continuing to edge backward. Thornton smiled thinly. "I think you do. Bill was many things, but subtle wasn't one of them. He's been watching my organization for years, documenting our activities, interfering with our operations. And now you've found his little command center, haven't you? The bunker beneath the scarecrow." My silence confirmed his suspicion. "We've been watching the farm since Bill's unfortunate passing," Thornton continued, waiting to see who would claim his legacy. "I must admit, I expected your mother. She has more of Bill's fire than she'd care to admit. But you'll do just as well." "My grandfather died of heart failure," I said, probing for information. Thornton's smile widened slightly. "Did he? How convenient for everyone. A man with a history of making accusations against respectable businesses suddenly dies of natural causes. No investigation necessary." "You killed him," I said, the reality I'd been avoiding finally spoken aloud. "I prefer to think of it as accelerating the inevitable," Thornton replied. "Bill's heart was failing anyway. We just helped it along. A tasteless compound in his coffee during our last meeting. Untraceable. Mimics natural heart failure perfectly." A cold fury built inside me, but I forced myself to remain calm. Lily was depending on me. "What do you want from us?" "Simple. You're going to take us to the bunker, open whatever security measures Bill put in place, and give us everything he collected. In return, you and your charming daughter get to walk away from this unpleasant business." "And if I refuse?" Thornton's pleasant expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. "Don't make me demonstrate how serious I am, Mr. Anderson. I have nothing against you, your daughter personally, but I've invested too much to let Bill's paranoid crusade destroy everything now." I felt Lily trembling behind me, heard her frightened breathing. I needed to protect her, but I also couldn't give Thornton what he wanted. Not when I was beginning to understand the scale of his operation. A sudden crash of thunder shook the barn, followed by the pattering of rain on the roof. The storm that had been threatening all evening had finally arrived. In the momentary distraction, I noticed something I hadn't before. A shadow moving outside one of the barn's broken windows, a familiar silhouette that gave me a surge of hope. Roy was alive, and he was out there. I needed to stall. "What exactly is it that you're planning, Thornton?" My grandfather's notes mentioned controlling water and food distribution. "What's the end game?" Thornton studied me for a moment, then shrugged elegant tone. "Insurance, Mr. Anderson. The world is changing. Climate shifts, political instability, economic upheaval. Chaos is coming. Those who control essential resources will control what emerges from that chaos. You're creating a crisis to profit from it," I said, echoing Grandpa Bill's notes. "Creating," Thornton laughed softly. "We're not creating anything. We're simply positioning ourselves to manage the inevitable. Droughts will come. Supply chains will fail. When they do, people will turn to whoever can provide water, food, security. We'll be those providers." Another thunderclap, closer this time, rattled the windows. The storm was intensifying, and with it, my determination. I wouldn't let this man win. Not after what he had done to my grandfather. Not with what he planned to do to countless others. "I'll take you to the bunker," I said, affecting defeat, "but my daughter stays here." "Dad, no," Lily whispered urgently. Thornton considered for a moment, then nodded. One of my men will stay with her. The other comes with us. Any tricks, Mr. Anderson, and your daughter will suffer for your poor decision." As Thornton spoke, a blinding flash of lightning illuminated the barn, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The lights in the barn flickered and died, plunging us into momentary darkness. In that instant, the window behind Thornton shattered inward, and a figure hurled through the opening. Roy Miller moved with the speed that belied his age, tackling one of the armed men before he could react. The barn erupted into chaos. Shouts, the thud of bodies colliding, the crack of a gunshot. "Lily, run!" I shouted, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward the hidden trapdoor. I yanked it open as another gunshot rang out, pushing her down into the tunnel. "Go! I'm right behind you!" I turned back to see Roy grappling with the second armed man, while Thornton was nowhere in sight. The old veteran was holding his own, but he couldn't last long against a younger, armed opponent. I grabbed a rusty pitchfork from the wall and charged, driving the tines into the gunman's side. Not deep enough to kill, but enough to make him howl in pain and drop his weapon. Roy delivered a knockout blow to the man's temple, sending him crumpling to the ground. "Where's Thornton?" I gasped. "Ran when the fighting started," Roy panted, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "Probably calling reinforcements. We need to move." We scrambled down into the tunnel, securing the trapdoor behind us. The passage was narrow, forcing us to move in single file. Roy leading with a small flashlight, me following, Lily between us. "I was starting to think they'd got you," I said, as we hurried through the darkness. "Almost did," Roy replied grimly. "Jumped me near the workshop. I played dead until they moved on. Old Vietnam trick. Been circling back ever since, looking for an opening." We reached the bunker's main room, which hummed with activity. Computers monitoring the farm's perimeter, alarms flashing to indicate breaches at multiple points. "They've got at least 8 men on the property," Roy said, checking the security feeds. "And Thornton will be calling in more. We need to get that evidence out and get you two to safety." "How?" I asked. "They've surrounded the farm." Roy moved to a cabinet, unlocking it with a key from his pocket. Inside was an arsenal of weapons that made my eyes widen. "Bill believed in being prepared," he explained, selecting a handgun and checking its magazine. "But we're not going to shoot our way out. We're going to use the storm." He pointed to a weather radar display on one of the monitors. The storm cell over the farm was massive, with more severe weather rolling in from the west. "Power's already out in the area," Roy continued. "Roads will be flooding soon. We can use the maintenance tunnels that run beneath the drainage ditches. They'll get us to the creek and from there to my property. I've got a truck hidden in my barn, off the grid, untraceable." Lily, who had been silent since entering the bunker, finally spoke. "But what about all of Great-Grandpa's work? We can't just leave it for those men to find." Roy smiled grimly. "Bill thought of everything. There's a self-destruct protocol, not explosives, nothing that dramatic, but it will wipe the computers, shred the physical documents, and seal the bunker with reinforced barriers. They'd need heavy equipment and weeks of work to get in." "But all the evidence will be lost," I protested. "Not all of it." Roy nodded to the USB drive in my hand. "That contains everything Bill deemed essential, enough to take down Thornton's operation if it reaches the right people." I thought of the note Collins had delivered. "Trust Agent Diana Harper at the FBI's Lincoln Field office." "We need to get this to the FBI," I said. "Grandpa mentioned an Agent Harper." Roy nodded. "Diana Harper. She's been Bill's contact for years. Started as a young agent assigned to cold cases related to Marcus Reynolds, ended up heading the white-collar crime division in Lincoln. She's trustworthy." A warning klaxon suddenly blared through the bunker, and one of the monitors flashed red. "Perimeter breach at the Scarecrow entrance," Roy announced. "They found the primary access point. How long before they get in?" "Minutes if they have the right equipment." Roy moved to a control panel, entering a complex sequence of commands. "Initiating Protocol Omega. We have 5 minutes before lockdown. Grab anything else you need, now." I rushed to the wall where the family photographs hung, carefully removing them from their frames and tucking them into my jacket. Lily went to the bookshelves, selecting a leather-bound volume. "Great-Grandpa's War Journal," she explained. "We should save it." I nodded, proud of her presence of mind, even in crisis. "Roy, is there anything else we should take? Anything Bill would have wanted preserved?" The old veteran was already at a safe built into the wall, spinning the dial with practiced motions. "Just this," he said, removing a small metal box. "Bill's most personal effects. Letters from Ellie that were too precious to digitize. Their wedding rings. The only copy of their marriage certificate." The warning klaxon changed pitch, becoming more urgent. "2 minutes to lockdown," an automated voice announced. "Time to go," Roy said, leading us to a narrow door I hadn't noticed before. It opened onto a concrete tunnel barely tall enough to stand in, lit by widely spaced emergency bulbs. "This will take us to the drainage system. Stay close and watch your footing. It'll be slippery." We entered the tunnel just as the lockdown sequence reached its final countdown. Behind us, heavy metal barriers began descending from the ceiling of the bunker, sealing off sections in sequence. The last thing I saw before the final barrier dropped was the wall of monitors showing Thornton's men breaching the main entrance, only to find themselves trapped in the entry corridor as the security measures activated. The maintenance tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly, the sound of rushing water growing louder as we proceeded. The storm above was intensifying, funneling rainwater into the drainage system that Roy had said would be our escape route. "Almost there," Roy called back to us. "When we reach the junction, we'll need to move quickly. The current will be strong." The tunnel ended at a T-intersection with a larger concrete channel, now half filled with swiftly moving water. Metal rungs embedded in the wall led up to what appeared to be a manhole cover. "That leads up to the creek bank," Roy explained. "From there, it's a quarter-mile through woods to my property. The water level's higher than I expected. We'll need to be careful." He looked at Lily with concern. "Can you swim, young lady?" She nodded, though her eyes were wide with fear. "I'm on the swim team at school." "Good girl. Stay between your father and me. If the current gets too strong, we form a human chain. No heroes, no panic. Understood?" We both nodded, and Roy began climbing the metal rungs. At the top, he pushed against the manhole cover, straining against years of disuse. With a grinding sound, it finally gave way, and the full fury of the storm hit us. Rain driving horizontally in the howling wind, lightning illuminating the landscape in staccato flashes. Roy helped us out onto the creek bank, which was rapidly disappearing as the water rose. We were in a wooded area, the trees bending in the gale-force winds. In the distance, I could see lights moving on the farm property. Thornton's men searching, unaware that their quarry had escaped underground. "This way!" Roy shouted over the storm, pointing toward a barely visible path through the Turin. "Stay low and move fast." We ran through the woods, soaked to the skin within seconds, the roar of the storm masking any sounds of pursuit. Fallen branches and mud made the going treacherous, but the same conditions would hamper Thornton's men if they managed to track us. After what seemed like an eternity of stumbling through darkness broken only by lightning flashes, we emerged at the edge of another farm, Roy's property. Unlike Grandpa Bill's weathered buildings, Roy's farm was well maintained, the house small but solid, the barn freshly painted. "In here," Roy directed, leading us to the barn. Inside, as promised, was a mud-spattered pickup truck with no license plates. "Get in. There's dry clothing in the duffel bag in the back seat. Change while I get us ready to move." As Lily and I gratefully exchanged our soaked clothes for dry ones, Roy collected supplies: food, water, a first aid kit, and more ammunition for his handgun. Within minutes, he had the truck started and was guiding it down a back trail that seemed to bypass the main road entirely. "Where are we going?" I asked, holding Lily close as she finally gave in to exhaustion, her head resting against my shoulder. "Safe house about 50 miles from here," Roy replied, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors. "One of Bill's contingency locations. We'll contact Agent Harper from there." The gravity of our situation was finally hitting me. In the space of a few days, I'd gone from unemployed divorcee to fugitive from a powerful criminal organization. I discovered that my family history was built on lies, that my grandfather had been a hero rather than a paranoid recluse, and that my grandmother might still be alive after decades in hiding. And through it all, my 12-year-old daughter had shown more courage than I could have imagined, thrust into a dangerous world of conspiracies and violence that no child should have to face. "Roy," I said quietly, "what happens now? Even if we get this evidence to the FBI, Thornton has resources, connections. People like him don't go down easily." The old veteran's weathered face was grim in the glow of the dashboard lights. You're right about that. Bill tried for decades to bring down this organization through official channels. Made some progress, but the network is like a hydra. Cut off one head, two more take its place. So what's different now? The scale, Roy said simply. What Thornton's planning isn't just criminal, it's a threat to national security. Controlling water and food distribution during a crisis? That's the kind of leverage that gets federal task forces mobilized. He glanced at me. Plus, we have something Bill never did. What's that? Proof of murder. Roy's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Thornton admitted to killing Bill, and we have witnesses. That changes everything. As we drove through the storm, I found myself wondering what Grandpa Bill would think of this moment. His grandson and his old war buddy fleeing into the night with the evidence he'd spent decades collecting. His great-granddaughter sleeping innocently despite the danger surrounding her. I looked down at Lily's peaceful face and made a silent promise. To her, to myself, and to the grandfather I'd never truly known. I would see this through. I would protect my family. I would finish what William Anderson had started, no matter the cost. The truck pushed on through the darkness, carrying us toward an uncertain future and the final confrontation with the man who had destroyed my grandfather's life and now threatened my own. Dawn broke over the safe house, a modest cabin nestled in a dense stand of pines 20 miles outside Lincoln. After our harrowing escape through the storm, Roy had driven through the night on back roads, changing vehicles twice at prearranged locations. Another testament to Grandpa Bill's meticulous planning. Lily had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep, curled under a blanket on the cabin's small couch, while Roy stood watch at the window, his weathered face grim in the early light. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence we'd managed to salvage. The USB drive containing decades of my grandfather's investigation, the metal box of personal letters, and the family photographs that were among the few tangible connections to a grandmother I'd never known existed until days ago. We need to contact Agent Harper, I said, my voice rough from too little sleep and too much tension. How do we reach her without exposing our location? Roy nodded toward an old ham radio set up in the corner of the cabin. Bill installed secure communications in all his safe houses. This one runs on encrypted frequencies the FBI monitors. Harper will get the message within the hour. As Roy operated the radio with practiced efficiency, I checked on Lily. Despite everything she'd been through, she slept peacefully, her face relaxed in a way it hadn't been since our nightmarish encounter with Thornton's men. I gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, overwhelmed by the fierce protectiveness I felt. She'd shown remarkable courage throughout this ordeal, but she was still a child who should never have been dragged into such danger. Mike, come here, Roy called softly. I've got contact. I joined him at the radio as a woman's voice emerged from the static, professional but with an unmistakable edge of urgency. This is Harper, authentication code Sierra November 74. Identify. Roy spoke into the microphone. Sentinel relay, code Whiskey Alpha 38. We have the package and witnesses. Immediate extraction required. There was a brief pause before Harper responded. Authentication confirmed. Coordinates? Roy gave her the cabin's location using a code system I didn't understand, then added, be advised, Anderson and daughter present, along with critical evidence. Thornton made direct admission of William Anderson's murder. We were witness. Understood, Harper replied, her tone sharpening. Secure your position. Extraction team ETA 90 minutes. Harper out. As Roy signed off, I noticed him wince slightly, pressing a hand to his side. You're hurt, I said, suddenly realizing he'd been concealing an injury since our escape from the farm. Caught a ricochet during the firefight in the barn, he admitted, lifting his shirt to reveal a bloody graze along his ribs. Nothing serious. Let me see that, I insisted, finding a first aid kit in one of the kitchen cabinets. As I cleaned and bandaged the wound, Roy filled me in on what to expect. Harper's one of the good ones. 20 years with the Bureau, specializing in organized crime and white-collar cases. She's been working with Bill for almost a decade, building a case against Reynolds' old network and now Thornton's operation. Problem was, they never had enough concrete evidence to move against someone with Thornton's connections and resources. Until now, I said, securing the bandage. Until now, Roy agreed. Between the USB drive, our witness testimony about Thornton's confession, and whatever Bill managed to preserve in the bunker before lockdown, they might finally have enough to move. Lily stirred on the couch, blinking awake in the growing daylight. Dad, where are we? Somewhere safe, sweetheart, I assured her, moving to sit beside her. Help is coming. She sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. I had a dream about great-grandpa Bill. He was standing next to the scarecrow, smiling at us. He said everything would be okay. Roy and I exchanged glances. Your great-grandpa was a smart man, Roy told her. I'd trust his judgment. While we waited for the extraction team, I explained to Lily as gently as possible what would happen next. FBI agents would come to take us somewhere secure. We would tell them everything we'd seen and learned, and they would use that information to stop Thornton and his organization. But what about great-grandpa's farm? She asked, concerned. And all his things in the bunker? The bunker's sealed tight, Roy assured her. Thornton's men won't be able to get in without heavy equipment, and by then the FBI will have secured the property. Lily nodded, then asked the question that had been forming in my own mind. Dad, Grandma Ellie, is she really still alive? Will we meet her? I don't know, honey, I admitted. She's been in witness protection for a very long time. It might not be safe for her to come out, even now. But she's family, Lily insisted with the simple certainty of a child. She should be with us. Before I could respond, Roy stiffened, his hand moving to the weapon at his side. Vehicle approaching, not scheduled for another 40 minutes. I moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight. A black SUV was coming up the long driveway to the cabin, moving slowly, deliberately. Thornton? I asked, my heart racing. Roy shook his head. Can't be. No way he could have tracked us here. Unless someone told him, I said, the awful possibility forming in my mind. Someone who knew about Grandpa's safe houses. There's only 3 people who knew about all of them, Roy said grimly. Me, Bill, and Collins. The lawyer, I murmured, remembering his nervous demeanor, his convenient late-night visit to the farm. Could Thornton have gotten to he? Wouldn't be the first time money bought loyalty, Roy said, checking his weapon. Get Lily to the back bedroom. There's a hidden compartment in the floor under the rug. Emergency supplies in a tunnel that leads to the forest. If this goes south, you take her and run. Understand? I nodded, guiding Lily quickly to the bedroom and showing her the hidden trapdoor. Stay here, honey. Don't come out unless I call for you. Dad, I'm scared, she whispered, clutching my hand. I know, sweetheart. I am too. But I promise I won't let anything happen to you. I pressed a quick kiss to her forehead. Remember what great-grandpa Bill wrote? Find what's buried. Sometimes what's buried is courage, and I think you've got plenty of that. Her small smile gave me strength as I closed the bedroom door and rejoined Roy at the front of the cabin. The SUV had stopped about 50 yards from the house, and a single figure emerged. A woman in a tailored suit, her dark hair streaked with silver, moving with confident purpose toward the cabin. That's not Thornton's people, Roy said, lowering his weapon slightly. That's Harper. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by confusion. She's early and alone. Roy frowned. Not protocol. She should have a team with her. The woman reached the porch and knocked on the door, her voice carrying clearly. Roy Miller? Michael Anderson? This is Special Agent Diana Harper, FBI. We need to talk. Roy approached the door cautiously, positioning himself to the side. Authentication code? Sierra November 7-4, she replied without hesitation. Roy relaxed slightly but kept his weapon ready. Why are you alone, Agent Harper? Where's your team? Change of plans, she said. We have intelligence that Thornton has people watching the main roads. A full tactical team would draw too much attention. I came ahead to secure you and the evidence. The team will rendezvous with us at a secondary location. It made sense, but something felt off. Roy must have felt it too, because he hesitated before finally opening the door. Agent Harper stepped inside, her keen eyes quickly assessing the cabin and its occupants. She was in her early 50s, with the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd spent decades in law enforcement. Mr. Anderson, I'm Diana Harper. Bill spoke highly of you. You knew my grandfather well? I asked, studying her carefully. As well as anyone could know Bill, she replied with a slight smile. He was compartmentalized, a necessary precaution in his line of work. And what line of work was that exactly? I pressed, still not entirely convinced. Officially, Bill was a civilian consultant on certain investigations. Unofficially, he was one of our most valuable assets in tracking Marcus Reynolds' network and later Richard Thornton's expansion of that enterprise. Harper moved to the kitchen table, eyeing the USB drive and documents. Is this what you managed to salvage from the bunker? Roy nodded. The essential files plus personal items Bill wanted preserved. Harper picked up the USB drive, examining it. This contains everything, the entire investigation? Everything Grandpa Bill deemed critical, I confirmed. But the complete archives are still in the bunker, secured behind the lockdown protocol. Good, Harper said, pocketing the drive. The Bureau can send a specialized team to retrieve the rest once we've dealt with Thornton. She turned to Roy. Where's the girl? A warning bell sounded in my mind. My daughter is resting, I said carefully. She's been through a lot. Harper nodded, but something in her expression hardened almost imperceptibly. We should get her. We need to move quickly. Roy shifted position slightly, placing himself between Harper and the hallway leading to the bedroom. What's the rush, Agent Harper? You said the extraction team would be meeting us at a secondary location. Thornton's people are on the move, she said briskly. We've intercepted communications indicating they have narrowed down your location to this general area. It's not safe to remain here. It was a reasonable explanation, but Roy's tension was infectious. Something wasn't adding up. Before we go anywhere, I said, I'd like to know more about my grandmother, Ellanor Reynolds. Is she still alive? Still in witness protection? Harper's expression softened. Yes, Mr. Anderson. Ellie is alive and well, living under a new identity. She's been moved multiple times over the decades as Marcus Reynolds' associates got close. But she's safe. And when can we see her? I pressed. Once Thornton has been apprehended and the immediate threat neutralized, we can discuss reuniting your family, Harper replied, checking her watch impatiently. But right now, we need to focus on getting you all to safety. She started toward the hallway, but Roy didn't move aside. One more question, Agent Harper. The authentication code you gave at the door, Sierra November 74, what does it signify? Harper blinked, momentarily thrown by the question. It's a standard Bureau identifier for this operation. Roy's expression hardened. Wrong answer. It's Bill and Ellie's wedding anniversary. September 7th, 1974. Bill picked it specifically because only someone who truly knew him would understand its significance. In one fluid motion, Harper reached for a weapon concealed beneath her jacket, but Roy was faster. His gun was leveled at her chest before she could clear the holster. Who are you really? Roy demanded, his voice deadly quiet. The woman's demeanor changed instantly, the professional facade replaced by a cold calculation. You're smarter than Thornton gave you credit for, old man. Thornton sent you, I said, the betrayal dawning on me. How did you find us? Your lawyer friend Collins was quite helpful once we explained the consequences of non-cooperation, she replied with a thin smile. He knew about several of Bill's safe houses. It was just a matter of checking each one. She glanced at the USB drive in her pocket. Thank you for confirming this is what we're looking for. Thornton will be pleased. You won't make it out of here without that drive, Roy said, his aim unwavering. I don't need to, the woman replied calmly. I just needed to confirm your location and the existence of the evidence. The team outside will handle the rest. My blood ran cold as I realized the implications. What team? As if in answer, the distant sound of vehicles approaching reached us through the open window. Not one, but several, moving fast up the access road. Thornton's cleanup crew, the fake Harper said with satisfaction. They're very thorough. Roy's expression was grim. Mike, get Lily and go, now. I didn't hesitate, turning to race down the hallway. Behind me, I heard a commotion as Roy and the imposter struggled. A gunshot rang out, then another, but I couldn't stop to look back. Lily's safety was all that mattered now. I burst into the bedroom to find Lily already at the trap door, her face pale but determined. I heard the gunshots, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. We have to go, don't we? Yes, sweetheart, I confirmed, helping her into the hidden compartment. As fast and as quiet as we can. The compartment contained emergency supplies, just as Roy had said. Flashlights, water, a first aid kit, and a small backpack that I quickly loaded with essentials. The tunnel beyond was narrow but well constructed, reinforced with timber supports and equipped with dim emergency lighting. "What about Roy?" Lily asked as we entered the tunnel. I hesitated, torn between my duty to my daughter and my loyalty to the man who had risked everything to help us. "He's buying us time," I finally said, the words bitter in my mouth. "He'd want us to keep going." We moved quickly through the tunnel, which sloped gently downward before leveling out. After about 100 yards, it opened into a small, concrete chamber with a ladder leading upward. At the top was another trapdoor, this one opening into a dense thicket of pines some distance from the cabin. From our hidden vantage point, I could see the cabin surrounded by black SUVs, men in tactical gear moving with military precision to secure the perimeter. There was no sign of Roy or the woman who had impersonated Agent Harper. "Dad, look," Lily whispered, pointing to a figure emerging from the lead vehicle. Richard Thornton, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, surveying the operation with cold detachment. My hand tightened on the USB drive I'd managed to grab from the fake Harper during the confusion. We still had Grandpa Bill's evidence, but we were alone, outnumbered, and now pursued by professionals who wouldn't stop until they found us. "We need to keep moving," I whispered to Lily. "Stay low and follow me." We crept through the underbrush, putting distance between ourselves and the cabin. The forest was dense, providing good cover, but every cracking twig and rustling leaf seemed amplified in the morning stillness. I had no plan beyond immediate escape, no idea how to contact the real FBI or where to find safety. We had covered perhaps half a mile when the sound of approaching vehicles reached us again, not from the direction of the cabin, but from the forest road ahead. I pulled Lily behind a fallen tree, heart hammering as headlights cut through the trees. 3 black SUVs with government plates rolled to a stop on the road, and armed agents in FBI tactical gear deployed in practice formation. From the lead vehicle emerged a woman, shorter than the imposter, with steel gray hair cut in a practical bob, her movements suggesting decades of field experience. "Secure the perimeter," she ordered, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "Satellite imaging shows multiple hostiles at the cabin site. Proceed with caution." I hesitated, torn between approaching what appeared to be genuine FBI agents and the fear of another trap. The decision was made for me when Lily shifted position and dislodged a small avalanche of pine needles and twigs. The sound was minute, but it caught the attention of one of the agents, who swung his weapon in our direction. "Movement in the trees, 10 o'clock, he called out. "We're unarmed," I shouted, raising my hands. "My name is Michael Anderson. My daughter is with me. We're being pursued by Richard Thornton's men." "Anderson?" the gray-haired woman called back. "William Anderson's grandson?" "Yes," I confirmed, still not moving from cover. "How do I know you're really FBI?" "Smart question," she replied. "Authentication code Sierra November 74. Bill and Ellie's wedding anniversary. Bill always said you had his skeptical mind." It was the correct response, the one the imposter had failed to provide. Still cautious, I slowly stood, keeping Lily behind me. Someone already tried that code on us, a woman claiming to be Agent Harper. The gray-haired woman's expression hardened. "I'm the real Diana Harper, and if Thornton has someone impersonating federal agents, this situation just escalated significantly." She gestured to her team. "Secure these civilians and get them to the transport. Priority 1 protection." Within minutes, Lily and I were safely inside an armored FBI vehicle, blankets around our shoulders, as Agent Harper debriefed us on the situation. "We've been monitoring Thornton's communications since Bill's death," she explained. "When the bunker's emergency protocols activated last night, we knew someone had accessed Bill's evidence. We've had satellite surveillance on the farm and known safe houses since then." "Roy Miller," I said urgently. "He's still at the cabin. Thornton's people have him." Harper's expression was grim. "We'll do everything possible to extract him, but our priority is securing you, your daughter, and the evidence Bill collected." I handed her the USB drive. "This contains everything: decades of investigation, evidence of money laundering, infrastructure manipulation, and now murder. Thornton admitted to killing my grandfather." Harper examined the drive with reverence. "Bill spent his life building this case. With your testimony about Thornton's confession, We finally have what we need to move against him directly. What happens now? I asked, holding Lily close. We get you to a secure location, take your formal statements, and prepare for the biggest organized crime takedown since RICO was enacted, Harper replied. Thornton thinks he's untouchable because of his connections and resources. He's about to learn otherwise. A commotion outside drew our attention. Agents were escorting someone to our vehicle, a battered, bloody, but very much alive Roy Miller. Roy! Lily cried as the old veteran was helped into the SUV. Found him making his way through the forest about a quarter-mile from the cabin, one of the agents reported. Says he played dead after taking a hit, then slipped away during the confusion. That woman wasn't Harper, Roy said grimly, wincing as a medic attended to a gunshot wound in his shoulder. She was Thornton's plant. We know, the real Harper assured him. You did well to recognize the deception. Few people would have caught that detail about the authentication code. Not many people knew Bill and Ellie like I did, Roy replied simply. As our convoy pulled away, heading for what Harper described as a secure federal facility, I finally allowed myself to believe we might survive this ordeal. But one question continued to nag at me. Agent Harper, I said quietly, while Lily was distracted talking with Roy. My grandmother, is she really still alive? Harper studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Ellanor Reynolds has been in witness protection for 48 years. She's been moved 17 times as Marcus Reynolds' associates got close. After his death, Thornton continued the hunt. Not out of personal vendetta, but because she knew too much about the organization's origins. Will we be able to see her? I asked, hardly daring to hope. That's a complicated question, Harper replied carefully. Officially, Ellanor Reynolds ceased to exist decades ago. Bringing her back into the open could create significant legal and security challenges. My heart sank, but Harper wasn't finished. However, given the circumstances and the likelihood that Thornton's organization will be dismantled following your testimony, I believe special arrangements could be made. She offered a rare smile. Bill never gave up hope of reuniting his family someday. I'd like to help make that happen. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of secure facilities, formal statements, and intelligence briefings. Lily and I were installed in a safe house under heavy protection, while the FBI, armed with Grandpa Bill's meticulously gathered evidence and our testimony, launched coordinated raids against Thornton's organization across the Midwest. By evening, the news was reporting the arrest of Richard Thornton on multiple charges including racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy, and murder. 17 of his key associates had been taken into custody, and properties linked to Reynolds' agricultural holdings were being searched by federal agents. The conspiracy my grandfather had spent decades tracking was finally being exposed to the light. Agent Harper visited us the following morning, her exhausted appearance testament to a sleepless night overseeing the operation. Thornton's network is coming apart, she reported with satisfaction. We've seized control of the modified water systems at 7 strategic locations, preventing any attempt to weaponize that infrastructure. The evidence from Bill's bunker is even more comprehensive than we hoped. Financial records, surveillance, witness testimonies. Thornton's lawyers are already approaching us about a deal. He admitted to murdering my grandfather, I said firmly. I want him held accountable for that. He will be, Harper assured me. The murder confession is one of our strongest pieces of evidence. With your testimony and Roy's, Thornton will spend the rest of his life in prison. And the farm, I asked, is it safe to return? We've secured the property and disabled the lockdown protocol on the bunker. Everything's being documented as evidence, but once the investigation is complete, it will be returned to you as the rightful owner. Harper hesitated, then added, There's someone who'd like to see you, both of you. She stepped aside, and into the room walked an elderly woman with silver hair and remarkably familiar blue eyes, the same eyes I saw every morning in the mirror, the same eyes Lily had inherited. Though aged by decades since the photographs I'd seen, there was no mistaking Ellanor Reynolds. Michael, she said softly, her voice steady despite the emotion clearly written on her face. And this must be Lily. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. You look so much like your great-grandfather. I stood frozen, overwhelmed by the reality of meeting this woman who had existed only in faded photographs and secret letters until now. Lily, however, had no such hesitation. She stepped forward, studying Ellie's face with innocent curiosity. "Are you really my great-grandma?" she asked. "The one who had to go away to protect everyone?" Ellie nodded, kneeling to meet Lily at eye level. "Yes, sweetheart, I had to go away for a very long time. It broke my heart to leave your great-grandfather and your grandmother, Elizabeth. Not a day went by that I didn't think of them." "Great-grandpa Bill never stopped looking for you," Lily said with the simple certainty of a child. "He built a whole secret bunker in everything." A smile broke through Ellie's composure. "That sounds like Bill. Always preparing, always planning." She looked up at me, uncertainty in her expression. "I understand if you have questions, Michael. Anger, even. What happened to our family wasn't fair to any of you." There were 1,000 questions I wanted to ask, a lifetime of absence to account for. But in that moment, only one thing seemed important. I stepped forward and embraced the grandmother I'd never known, feeling her surprise give way to relief as she returned the hug. "Welcome home," I said simply. The reunion with my mother was more complicated. When I called to tell her that her mother was alive, had been alive all these years, her initial response was disbelief, followed by anger so profound it manifested as cold silence. It would take time, I realized, for her to process decades of believing her mother had abandoned her, only to learn that Ellie had made the ultimate sacrifice to keep her safe. "Give her time," Ellie advised when I reported the difficult conversation. "Elizabeth has lived with one version of the truth her entire life. It won't be easy for her to accept another." A week later, we returned to the farm, Lily, Ellie, Roy, and I, to begin the process of reclaiming what had been lost. The FBI had completed their evidence collection, leaving the bunker accessible but largely intact. Standing in that underground command center where Grandpa Bill had spent countless hours documenting Thornton's crimes, I felt a profound connection to the grandfather I'd barely known. "He built all this for you," Roy said, watching me examine the sophisticated systems. "Not just the physical structure, but the investigation, the evidence, the connections. Bill knew someday you'd be standing here, continuing what he started." "But why me?" I asked. "Why not try harder to convince my mother of the truth?" "Elizabeth made her choice years ago," Ellie said gently. "She wanted a normal life, away from conspiracy and danger. Bill respected that, even though it broke his heart to be estranged from his daughter. But he saw something in you, Michael. The same determination, the same sense of justice that drove him." Over the following months, we gradually transformed the farm from a neglected property into a true home. Roy, whose own farm was just a few miles away, became a daily presence, teaching me the basics of agriculture and helping repair the long-neglected buildings. My architecture skills proved useful as we renovated the farmhouse, making it comfortable for modern living while preserving its character. For Ellie, we converted the old workshop into a small cottage where she could have independence while remaining close to the family she'd lost for so long. The transition from witness protection to public life was challenging for her after decades of anonymity, but her joy at being reunited with her family outweighed the difficulties. Lily thrived in the country setting, developing an unexpected passion for gardening under Ellie's patient guidance. The city girl who had once complained about lack of internet access now spent hours happily digging in the soil, planting vegetables, and learning the rhythms of rural life. My own transformation was perhaps the most surprising. The unemployed architect who had arrived at the farm filled with doubt and desperation had found purpose in an unexpected legacy. Agent Harper, impressed by my understanding of structural design and security systems, offered me a consulting position with the FBI, designing secure facilities and analyzing architectural vulnerabilities in protected sites. 6 months after our return to the farm, on a warm summer evening, Ellie and I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, the scarecrow, rebuilt and repositioned as a normal farm decoration rather than a sentinel, stood silhouetted against the fading light. "Bill loved this time of day," Ellie said softly. "He'd sit right here watching the sun go down and say the same thing every evening. The truth always finds its way to the light." "He was right," I replied, thinking of Thornton now awaiting trial, his criminal empire dismantled, his carefully constructed facade of legitimacy shattered. "Sometimes it just takes longer than we expect." Ellie reached over to squeeze my hand. Bill would be so proud of what you've done here, not just helping bring Thornton to justice, but making this place a home again, bringing life back to the land. From the direction of the barn came Lily's excited voice, calling out as she ran toward us across the yard, Roy following at a more measured pace. Dad, great-grandma, come see what we found. There's a perfect spot behind the barn for a big vegetable garden, and Roy says we can start plowing it tomorrow. As I watched my daughter's animated face, flushed with excitement and possibility, I understood at last what Grandpa Bill's true legacy had been. Not the bunker with its secrets, not the evidence that had brought down a criminal organization, but this, a family reunited, a future reclaimed, the chance to build something that would last beyond one lifetime. In the end, what Grandpa Bill had left behind wasn't buried in the earth at all, but in the connections he'd forged and protected across decades. Connections of blood and loyalty and love that no amount of time or distance could sever. That was a legacy worth inheriting, worth preserving, worth passing on. As the last light faded from the sky, I made a silent promise to the grandfather whose determination had made this moment possible. The truth had found its way to the light at last, and we would keep it there.